Let's remember that romantic scene which is indispensable in love movies. The faces of our main characters come closer to each other. Heads bow slightly with the music from behind. Just then, their lips touch. Now, the question I will ask for people who have done the act we call kissing many times or have watched it in movies may seem a bit silly. But why are we doing such a thing? So, what motivation underlies the need to rub our lips together during a romantic act? Let me explain what I mean with a simple example. Let's reenact the previous scene.
Good idea.
Let the faces of our characters come closer to each other and the heads will be slightly bowed again. But this time, the couples will rub their ears directly against each other. If you see a scene like this, you're probably gonna say what nonsense they are doing, right? Then, where exactly does this difference come from? Which seems ridiculous when done with the pinna, but arouses admiration for many people in front of the screen when done with the lips. Is it an innate feature, or is it something we are used to seeing around us many times? Let's look at kissing issue from a psychological point of view. When we look at the history of humanity, we see that the first writing about kissing came from India. According to this text, which is thought to belong to 1500 years BC, people living in North India bring their faces closer together and sniff each other in detail with their noses as a way of meeting. Probably the basis of this behavior is need to have an idea about the health and habits of the other person. But according to some interpretations, this sniffing behavior may have turned into a process in which the lips touch each other over time. In fact, according to some historians, the army of Alexander the Great, who occupied this region in the 3 centuries BC, may have played a role in the spread of this behavior to other cultures. But when we examine the issue in detail in different cultures, we see that there is no clear unity of behavior about kissing. Although it has been claimed that kissing behavior is seen in approximately 90% of cultures around the world until recently. A study published in 2015 provides us with clear information on this issue. In a study by William Yankovic et al., examining 168 different cultures in various parts of the world, it was revealed that romantic kissing with the lips touching each other was seen as normal in only 46% of all cultures. Even in some more isolated local cultures, this behavior has been described as a bad or disgusting experience. So, it seems that kissing is not an innate trait. If it were, it would not be limited to only half of the world, right? When we look at its vitality in general, we can say that this action performed by pressing the lips together is almost exclusively human. Although a similar behavior pattern can be found in a few primate species, this is not the case between mammals and other advanced living species. However, if there was an evolutionary purpose behind kissing, we should probably see this in other animals as well. Let's point out here that many animals show closeness to each other during courtship behavior. Especially in mammals, sniffing is a very common behavior because these creatures also have a very strong sense of smell. They can analyze whether the other person is a friend or an enemy just by sniffing. By the way, you know that we are the weakest mammals in terms of sense of smell. According to some interpretations based on this information, since the sense of smell is weak, we get too close to the face of the other person in order to analyze them. This may have triggered the kissing over time. This and many other unfounded views are found to explain why we kiss. Since these approaches are based only on simple observations, they are not sufficient to explain the issue. For example, another fantastic view was put forward by the English zoologist Desmond Morris in the 1960s. You've probably seen it somewhere. In nature, there's a behavior called premastication, that is, pre-chewing in some living things. In order for her baby to digest the food more easily, the mother transfers the food directly to her baby's mouth after chewing a little in her own mouth. In terms of appearance, some call it kiss feeding. According to Morris, this kind of evolutionary reason may lie behind the kissing behavior of humans. This is another interpretation that is very compelling, as you will notice. Then let's look at our brain to learn the details of the issue. Each of our senses perceiving the outside world is processed in a different region of the brain. For example, visual information from the eye is processed in the occipital cortex, which occupies a large area. The sense of smell is analyzed in the olfactory region, and the sound information is analyzed in the temporal lobe. On the other hand, there are other senses in our body. The sensations coming from the skin, internal organs, joints, and muscles are called somatic senses. These include various information such as touch, temperature, pressure, and pain, and we call the area where this information is processed in the brain the somatic sensory cortex. To understand what the act of kissing is, we need to look here at sensory cortex. There's a line running through the middle of our brain, and the area just behind this line forms the sensory cortex. Somatic sensations from different parts of our body are perceived in this region. In fact, the rule of thumb here is very simple. The more nerve endings per unit area in a structure in any part of our body, the larger the area occupies in the sensory cortex of that region. This determines how sensitive the relevant structure will be. In our image, you can see how much space some regions take up in the sensory cortex. As you will easily notice, the parts with the most area in the sensory cortex are the lips and fingers. For example, while our back makes up most of our body's surface area, it occupies a very small area in the sensory cortex. This is the reason why our backs are not sensitive. Let's just say if our body had structures proportional to the areas in the sensory cortex, it would look like this representatively. Even though it's not directly related to our subject, it is important to clarify an issue right here. And there's a similar radiating area just in front of the sensory cortex. And this is called the motor cortex. When you want to do an action, the relevant motor command is first formed in this region of the brain. It is then forwarded to the relevant safe or structure. We have just mentioned that the fingers occupy a large area of the sensory cortex. A similar situation applies to the motor cortex, but there's an interesting difference here. Compared to the other fingers, the index finger occupies more space in the sensory cortex, while the thumb occupies more space in the motor cortex. For this reason, we use our index finger more often when we're perceiving the outside world, and our thumb when making a motor movement. In fact, one of the places where this difference can be seen most clearly is mobile phones. Teens unconsciously use their thumbs when texting because the thumb takes up more space in the motor cortex. It allows them to type much faster. On the other hand, when we look at the elderly, we see that they use their index fingers, whose main task is to perceive the outside world during this motor movement. Even this approach is actually an indication of how far they are from that technology. Older people are very slow because they use the wrong fingers. Returning to our main subject, The structures that occupy the most space in the sensory cortex you see here are the lips and index finger. In other words, these are our structures that are most sensitive in perceiving the outside world. In fact, the best example of this is babies. If you take a baby in your hand, you will see that it insists on putting its finger in our eyes. Since this is a reconnaissance gesture, he does not use his thumb. It is mostly the index finger moving slowly in front of our eyes. Similarly, he puts almost everything he finds in his mouth. Fathers often interpret this situation as that their child is hungry. On the other hand, mothers think that their baby's gums are itchy because of their newly erupted teeth. However, what actually happens is that the baby uses its most sensitive structure, the lips, to perceive the outside world. To sum up, it's quite logical for our sensory cortex that two adult humans use their lips, which is the most capable of perceiving the outside world, during kissing, but of course, that is not the only reason. During a reflection, we also analyze the pheromones of other person through our nose. Pheromones, which we can roughly define as odorless odors, give us very important information about our biological properties that cannot be noticed at the conscious level. Thanks to this information, we analyze how suitable the other party is for us in the biological sense. Another important factor associated with kissing is saliva. Yes, you heard that right. The spit, the saliva. Although this information may make you feel a little bad, let's also mention that some saliva transfer occurs between couples during kissing. To give an example on the subject, as you know, there are some bacteria in the normal flora of our mouth. And according to a study, approximately 80 million bacteria were transferred between couples after just 10 seconds of kissing. Although this situation may seem bad at first, it actually turns into a beneficial event in the long term, thanks to the new bacteria introduced to the immune system. Of course, we should mention that we are talking about normal flora here. Things change when it comes to tooth decay or other harmful bacteria. Saliva is not a simple fluid. For example, in some clinical tests, the analysis of many chemicals is made from saliva examples. In fact, a similar analysis is done by our body during kissing. For example, a woman who kisses a man may have information about that man's testosterone even though she is not aware of it, thanks to the saliva passed to her. It should be noted that the act of kissing also has an effect on the reward center in our brain. Oxytocin and serotonin released, especially dopamine, are the main reasons for the pleasure and well-being that occurs during action. To sum up, kissing behavior is still not a fully resolved issue by science, but when we look at the information we have, we can say that kissing is an important behavioral model that facilitates our job in choosing the most suitable mates for our biology and the genes we have. Thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe our channel, and if you enjoyed the video, please thumbs up. Have a great day.